thinking about speaking to you for this episode, the theme of our podcast is using the power of communication for good. And what struck me was, particularly in the United States, the number of conservative politicians and pundits who accuse their Democratic opponents of being socialist or communist. In fact, one Washington Post article in 2019 wrote, while formally launching his 2020 re-election campaign on Tuesday, President Trump circled back to a word he has used publicly at least 118 times since becoming president: socialism. And so I wanted to just clarify with you, when obviously you have public figures who have very different views of what capitalism is, but do you see a Democrat like Joe Biden and a Republican like Donald Trump or Mitch McConnell or an independent like Bernie Sanders all as different flavors of capitalists? Or, as Donald Trump suggested, is there a fundamental difference that makes somehow his opponents anti-capitalist?
Yeah, so I hope I won't go on too long. Let me give you a three-part answer. First, it's important to note that capitalism is an ideologically charged concept, and socialism has always been its rhetorical twin. So actually, it was socialists in the late 19th century who were critical of economic inequality and critical of economic domination, who, for the most part, created the term capitalism as a means of naming the system, kind of naming the enemy. So rhetorically, the history here is very rich, and capitalism and socialism can't really be disentangled as twins. As terms. They're actually twins. With that said, you mentioned this aspect of American political rhetoric, which I think doesn't help us very much at all. I think most of the times in which people evoke the term socialism, they're debating the proper role of the state in the American economy. This is a very important debate, and there's lots of positions one could have, within that debate. But usually when the term socialism or radical socialism is wielded, I think it obscures that debate more so than it helps it. The moment you'd really want to focus on as the origin of that story, although it goes back earlier too, is really the Cold War and the context the Cold War created, in which charges of communism or socialism could be used to critique the involvement of the state in American life in any way of any kind. Now, one of the arguments in the book is that the state has always been involved in the economy, and to try to debate whether or not it should or shouldn't be, it's kind of a waste of time. The question is, how should the state be involved in the American economy? And so I think in terms of our political communication, we often go in the wrong direction there. Just the last part of your question, the term capitalist to me has a very specific meaning in the book. It's someone who owns capital and invests capital towards the end of profit and makes the economy go round. Trump was a figure like that. I think still is a figure like that. But when I think about politicians like a Biden or a Sanders, that's not really their role because they're politicians. They're involved in the administration of the state. With that said, Biden, I think, has been very explicit that he's quite comfortable embracing a capitalist economy. And I think Sanders, though Sanders identifies, of course, as a democratic socialist, if you look at his policies, I would suggest his policies want to move the American economy in much more of a social democratic direction. I think in more of a socialist direction. But the kind of policies that Sanders advocated, more progressive redistribution in terms of taxation, a larger role for the welfare state, I don't think those policies, if they were put in practice, would mean that the United States economy should no longer be characterized as a capitalist economy. I think it still would be characterized reasonably as a capitalist economy.
Thanks for watching this video clip of the Speak Good podcast. If you enjoyed this conversation, please check out our full conversations on your favorite podcast directory. We've spoken with everyone from the Secretary of the Smithsonian Institution about what it was like to be the founding director of the National Museum of African American History and Culture, to a member of Congress who describes his day job as being in the wrestling ring, to an expert storyteller who helps us understand how we can use stories to help us achieve our business goals. Thanks for watching.